Welcome, everyone, to our webinar speaking about early stage funding from the federal government, specifically SBIR and STTR grants. I'm Kirsten Leute of Osage University Partners, and we'll go to the next slide. I'm really pleased today to be joined by three excellent panelists. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, and then we'll dive more into the subject matter in just a bit. So we'll start with Barbara.
Great. Thank you very much, Kirsten. I'm happy to be here. So I run the SBIR STTR program for the National Science Foundation. My background, I'm a chemical engineer, material scientist, and technology person with my various degrees. And I have a ton of industry experience and a lot of experience working with startups, and also have my own startup like our program directors in our program. We all have startup experience. So really excited to tell you more about our program today.
Great. So glad to have you here, Barbara. Next up, Stephanie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Vertig. I'm the director of the small business programs here at the National Institutes of Health. I also help coordinate the programs more broadly for health and human services. I've been with NIH for over 20 years. I've had a lot of experience with the program here at NIH. And so I'm excited to talk about the program today and how small businesses can really utilize this to fund some of those great innovations and ideas.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. And next up, Monique.
Well, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for having us today. I'm Monique Pond. I'm a program director and team lead at the National Cancer Institute within the SBIR office. I've been here since 2018, and before that, I worked at a small business for several years as a regulatory consultant and medical writer, predominantly with oncology companies. Thanks for having me.
So glad that all of you could be here today for this subject. I know it's one that is near and dear to the hearts of so many of the academics that we work with. Before we dive into our webinar itself, we're going to talk about a few logistics. We'll go to the next slide. A recording of this webinar will be available on OUP's partner portal, and a recording will also be publicly available on our YouTube channel. The partner portal is an online portal for the tech transfer officers and researchers at our partner universities. It's full of relevant tech transfer and startup content. Once you're in the portal, for which you need to register if you have not already, you'll find a downloadable presentation deck as well as a video link for this webinar on the webinars page. You can also find both these resources, the partner portal as well as the YouTube channel via these QR codes that I've noted on this slide. We are going to have upcoming webinars, as you note at the bottom of this slide. That is going to be in early September. We're going to have another early stage funding opportunity webinar, this time focused on some medtech founders that we've been working with through our Equalize program. They're going to be talking about how they attained their early stage capital for their medtech startup. So look for registration for that coming up soon. We do encourage questions throughout our webinar. Please do use the Q&A tool. We did receive a lot of questions ahead of time. We will be answering those throughout the webinar. But if you have questions as they come up for our panelists, please do use the Q&A tool, and I will be monitoring those to ask them throughout the webinar. We'll go to the next slide then. A short intro on OUP for those of you who don't know us. We're a venture capital fund that partners with academic institutions to invest in their startups, typically by exercising participation rights that are available through their licenses. For those of you who don't know what participation rights are, they are the ability to invest in future rounds of a company on the same terms and conditions as other investors. We do have recommended language on participation rights if your institution does not currently include them in their license agreements. As part of this partnership, the institutions share in a portion of our profit and also receive programmatic support on tech transfer and academic startups, such as the webinars like this. We're now on our fourth fund, have made investments in over 150 different companies in all areas of deep science, which you can actually see on our next slide. This just shows some of our portfolio companies and the breadth of areas that we invest in. We're always happy to talk about anyone about our particular model. So feel free to always reach out to us to learn more about OUP itself. But that is not the focus of our webinar. We'll go to the next slide. Our focus of the webinar is to hear from these terrific panelists today about their particular SBIR and STTR programs. And Barbara, we're going to be starting with you to talk about NSF and Nation's Seed Fund.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here today with my SBIR colleagues from other organizations to talk to you about what's available and how we approach the NSF SBIR STTR program, which I have the great honor of leading, which is known as America's Seed Fund, powered by NSF, seedfund@nsf.gov. So you can find that, and there's more about that later. So next slide, please. So today I will go over a lot about our program, but I wanted to just start again with the NSF mission to not just promote the progress of science. And so we have a real deep science, deep technology interest with our SBIR program, but we really are focused on the national health, prosperity, welfare, as well as security. And a little bit of background, because you'll hear me refer to TIP on the next slide. So for many years, the NSF for 75 years, we just had our 75th anniversary, we've had these directorates focused on really each area of science. 3 years ago with the CHIPS and Science Act, the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships was formed. And I wanted to mention this because our SBIR program lives within the TIP Directorate. But the TIP Directorate has many, many programs to help translate research, help researchers translate from the university all the way to market. And so I encourage people to also check out the TIP website, tip@nsf.gov, because there's quite a lot there. This was really brought together as a multidisciplinary group, cross-functional group to help early researchers get their product to market. And the next slide kind of shows a visual of that this is our mission. So I won't take you through all of this. I think I'll mention the 3 areas: accelerating technology translation, fostering regional innovation and economic growth. So we have our Regional Engines program, we have I-Core hubs, all regionally distributed. And of course, preparing the workforce better. We have quite a few workforce initiatives and working with some of the new AI direction to ensure our country is prepared to have high-paying STEM jobs. So the next page is the picture. And the role of the Technology Innovation and Partnerships Group is to really go from that early stage funding and help people get to commercialization. And so the SBIR STTR program, of course, lives in the early part of that. So after basic research gets funded at NSF, researchers have proven that there's something there. We fund applied research out of our program. And I wanted to pause here for just a second and mention one of the questions that you asked was, is the SBIR program still going on? What's going on with it? And I can speak for all of my colleagues here in the different SBIR programs is that we are open for business. We are excited to take applicants. We are moving the merit review process forward as we always have, and we are awarding and putting new solicitations out all the time. So please pass the word. SBIR is alive and well, and looking at bipartisan support for reauthorization this year with even higher levels of set-asides. So I think it's a healthy program. So I wanted to share that before going to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about our particular program. So our program funds up to $2 million for startups that have transformative, deep science, deep tech, high impact technologies. So we require that there be a commercial purpose or a commercial vision for this. So at the stage we fund, you're transforming scientific discovery into products and services. And it has to be a for-profit company, but it can serve any sector. It could be a for-profit company whose customers would be government or not-for-profit, but the company itself, which you would form after being invited to do a proposal, has to be for-profit. The fabulous thing about the National Science Foundation SBIR program is we will consider anything for funding. I like to say we fund from potato chips to computer chips, from the bottom of the ocean to the deep reaches of space. All proposals are welcome if they have a novel technology that could benefit the United States populace in particular. So we have 3 phases to our funding. And the first phase is intended to be kind of 6 to 12 months. It says 6 to 18, but 6 to 12. It's a little over $300,000. Phase 2, $1.25 million. And that's that second, next 2 years. And then we have a matching grant, up to the first $1 million of other funding. And we won't go into detail other funding, so private funding, other grant funding. We will match up to $500,000, so 50 cents on the dollar. So if you raise $1 million, we can match up to 500,000. And one of the questions was, are we still doing the program? What's new? Late last year, we released the fast track solicitation, where a startup can apply for all 2 million at once and not have to go through multiple applications. So that's pretty exciting, I think, for our community. And I just awarded the first fast track proposals just in the spring. We started awarding. So we're seeing applicants for that. Next slide, please. Oh, and I put kind of where we fund, but we give money to everybody. Whoops, we lost my other slides.
We will pull that up for you. Hold on.
Thanks. I knew you would. So I have a second to talk about this. So
Yes.
You'll see that life sciences are about 1/3. And you're like, okay, if we're doing life sciences and Stephanie's doing life sciences, what might be the difference? So we do biomedical, biotechnology, synthetic biology. We do drug discovery, and we also do medical devices. So we do not do clinical trials. So that's why different programs, different kinds of funding. But we have a very big life sciences group. Information technologies, including AI, is becoming big, but we still have a lot of these other, I'll call it traditional things, chemistry and the environment, huge amount of photonics, quantum related stuff, and a lot of advanced materials and manufacturing. And I see a lot of drone proposals. So but beyond that, there's artificially prepared food, there's, changing the color of fish. We see everything. So it's really an exciting area. So this is really detailed and it's intended to be a reference piece, but I did want to tell you to get invited to do a proposal in NSF. We have a unique approach to that. We have a portal on our website where you submit, we call it a fit document. You'll see on the portal, it's called a project pitch. And this is where in a couple of pages, you tell us about the technology, your R&D plan, the team, and why this project matters. And then you will receive an invite. I'm sometimes reluctant to say this, we get about 11,000 of those a year, and we invite about a quarter to submit a full proposal. And we will give you that feedback in about 2 weeks on average. So less than a month for sure, but in 2 weeks on average. And if there's questions, we'll return it and ask you to provide more information. So it's definitely not we just look at it and say yes, no. Sometimes it's yes, no. The biggest reason why we say no is either it's too early and it's still more in that fundamental research phase, or it's too late and it's really engineering or product development. We're really looking for somebody who needs to do applied R&D work, 20% basic R&D, 80% applied. Then you're invited to do a proposal, and that requires a full review, and it takes about 4 to 6 months usually for us to process that. About a little bit higher than 15% of the phase 1 proposals get funded. And the main reason that we don't fund is that you did not explain your technology well, or you did not give us an R&D plan that was a real R&D plan. So the phase 1 proposals, the main reason that they get rejected are the technology not being developed, or the R&D plan not being an R&D plan, but being a work package that says objective outcome. We want to see the hypothesis, the methodology, and how you're going to measure. And that is the number one reason why the reviewers give low scores. I'm happy to say people who make it through phase 1, about half of them get a phase 2 award. And so it's very exciting to see that. And then they're eligible not just for phase 2B supplements, but for other types of supplements to help continue the work that they're doing and find partners. Next slide.
And I will just say, I'm just going to put this in here, Barbara. That is actually the number one question people always are asking is why, I really want to understand why I was rejected on the first time around. And so having those helpful tips is really useful. So thank you.
We also have started to put, I call them 2-minute tips on our website, and they're not big professional things. They're me and our program directors telling what we see as the things that help people be successful. And they really are less than 2 minutes each. So you can watch them and get some really quick tips on how to be successful. So we have, all of these folks have deep experience in the technology areas that we fund. They work together super collaboratively. So we have a topic page. It has 31 boxes. One of the boxes is other. So do not fuss about where you submit something. We triage everything and get it to the right person. So don't sweat that. Focus on the content of your proposal, and we'll make sure it gets to the right people. You never have to worry about that. Super collaborative team. Next slide, please. Roll. I wanted to just mention there is a program that we fund for entrepreneurial fellows via Activate, and I want to encourage people to check that out if they're appropriate. We are a major sponsor of these fellows, and we find a very high proportion of these fellows either have received SBIR awards or are fully capable of winning SBIR awards. So that's one of our very exciting programs. And I put all of the details on here, but check out the website. It's a fantastic program. I put a couple of examples in here that you can peruse at your own speed on the next couple of pages. So we have, I put this on here because you can see that people can start with us with an award as maybe in their graduate studies, and then get various kinds of awards from the TIP programs all the way to, commercial success, where in the case of NanoView Biosciences, they were able to raise a very large funding round and were acquired a couple of years ago. The next page is another example of that with METI. So a lot of people don't know we funded METI way back in 2012 with a basic research award. And again, you can come to NSF, especially with TIP now, and there's a series of awards that you can receive to take your business commercial. And so ecosystem partners like Osage University partners, these folks can really help coach companies to get through some of these major stages. And I think I have one last, and then so this is our website. So I mentioned it at seedfund.nsf.gov. And we have many stories of successful startups with videos. This happens to be Electra, one of the startups that we have on our page. And the website will walk you through the entire process. So take advantage of it. There's a 7-item self-assessment of what you're thinking about. And if you answer yes to all the questions, you're probably a pretty good candidate for our program. So I want to encourage people to we just put that up there a month or two ago, and take advantage of all of the information on the website and our webinars. We run regular webinars. We have a YouTube channel, and there is tons of how to be successful information on it. So we're always excited about you being involved, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. We are going to hold questions until we get through all the presentations. We have a lot of questions already for people, but with that, we'll pass it on to Stephanie.
Great, and I'm so glad there are a bunch of questions, and I encourage you to do submit those. We'd love to see those, and hopefully we'll get to them. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to be talking about NIH and how you can really utilize the NIH small business funding to be able to support your company and really move it further down the product development pipeline. And I'm going to do a great broad introduction, but then hopefully pass that off to Monique, who's going to talk a little bit about, give some tools and tips, but also talk a little bit about some specific institute or center guidance. So overall, we're going to hit a lot of information today. I really encourage you to go to our website. You heard it from NSF. You're going to hear it from me. There's a bunch of information on the web. I really do encourage you to go to our website, seed.nih.gov, if you have any questions. And you can also get information on how to contact us there as well. So if we go to the next slide, and we talked a little bit about the importance of this program, but really the overall mission of the National Institutes of Health is turning discoveries into health. And we utilize our small business program to get those great innovations that are out there throughout the country and get them into the hands of the patients, clinicians, caregivers, and researchers that need them. And so that's the whole point of our program. So going to the next slide, these are congressionally mandated programs specifically focused for small businesses. We're one of the largest sources of early stage capital for life sciences within the United States. Now, NIH, our program size is about $1.4 billion. So we've got this specific set aside of funding for small businesses to engage in research and development that has that potential for commercialization, that is focused on commercialization. You're going to hear us talk about two programs, the small business program, so the Small Business Innovation Research Program, SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, or STTR program. Very similar programs here at NIH, very similar mission, general scope, but there is one big difference. The big difference is that the SBIR program allows for partnering, and the STTR program requires partnering with the U.S. research institution that's a nonprofit. There are some policy differences between the two, but that's the big difference where kind of everything flows. When I'm talking about the programs more broadly, generally we're talking about both of them at the same time. We'll try to point out when something is specific to SBIR versus STTR. So if we go to the next slide, the real benefit of NIH funding is that awardees can leverage this funding to de-risk their technologies, de-risk their products, and attract investors and partners. It's non-dilutive capital. It's not a loan. It's really here to help, again, bring that technology further down the pipeline and get it hopefully into the hands of the individuals that need them. And going to the next slide, what you'll see, is those small business success stories. And so we do, much like NSF, we have a number of success stories and great examples on our website of individual companies that have done this. Why I like to point this out is because it shows we really do support companies across the United States. It also shows the wide variety of disease areas and modalities that fall within the National Institutes of Health. There are 24 different centers within the National Institutes of Health that have small business programs. NCI is one of them. But we do have 24 across the National Institutes of Health. And these institutes and centers cover a wide variety of disease areas and modalities. We have everything on our small business success stories, from what you see here, looking at water analysis, to even bicycle helmets to reduce traumatic brain injury, to different therapeutics and diagnostics and biologics. So again, take a look. If you go to the next slide, what is your next step? So talked about how great the program is. What's that next step? Well, the next step is looking at funding opportunities. Now, here's the great news. The majority of our funding goes through investigator-initiated grant applications. What does that mean? We have omnibus solicitations. These are parent solicitations that are really targeted on anything within our mission space, and they allow applicants to come into our program. Now, we have standard receipt dates for those omnibus solicitations. The next one is September 5th, and you can find links to those as well as our specific funding opportunities directly on our website. But if you go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we have those general omnibus solicitations. Again, those are general solicitations. We have specific solicitations for SBIR versus STTR, and for clinical trials not allowed and clinical trials required. Please do read our definition for clinical trials and read the program descriptions and research topics section that can be helpful in determining which institute or center you're likely to be assigned to, and if you're considered a clinical trial or not. We have a very broad definition of clinical trial. Please do read that definition. If you have any questions, reach out and talk to us. We also do have targeted solicitations. I included a couple of examples on the slide here. I'm not going to dive into those specifically, but again, happy to take any specific questions about those as well. So going to the next slide. These are phased programs, phase 1 and phase 2, standard phase 1, phase 2. We also have something called a fast track, allows us to combine the phase 1 and phase 2 into one proposal. And we have a direct to phase 2 that's SBIR only. So that's one of those examples of where it's specific to one of those programs. It's SBIR only. And then we also have, regardless of how you get to a phase 2, we have a number of ways that we can continue to support companies and support the project and bridge that gap to the commercial market partner or investor. One of the other big themes is flexibility in our program. So you can see we have flexible numbers of ways that you can come into the program, but we also have flexibility with regards to budget guidelines. And we do have specific topics that allow us to exceed the budget guidelines that we have from the Small Business Administration that you see there in the corner. So we can provide more funding for specific projects based on what you're requesting in your proposal or application. So if you go to the next slide, that's a lot of information. You're ready to apply. What next? We do have application resources online. I encourage you to take a look at those application resources. That includes instructions, annotated form set, and most importantly, sample applications. I think if we get one request, it's what's a sample application? We've got those online. I do encourage you to take a look at those as well. I also encourage you to reach out if you haven't already done so. Talk to your state resources. We have a link on our website to those state resources that can help you submit that application, not just to NIH, but also to NSF and others. So next slide. I think Monique's going to go a little bit more into some of the tips of writing an application to NIH and the review process. So I'm not going to go into this in detail, except if you've submitted to NIH using a R01 or one of our standard research project grants, this is a very similar process. We have assigned reviewers, we use peer review, but it is tailored to a commercial product. And so one of the tools and tips, I'm not going to steal too much of Monique's thunder, but one of the tools and tips, read the notice of funding opportunities very carefully. We do provide specific questions that the peer reviewers are going to be asking themselves when they're reviewing your application. We are and so you can look at those as you're crafting your application. The other suggestion I would make, be prepared to resubmit. This is a competitive program. It's been a competitive program for a while. Resubmission is part of the process here at NIH, so we do encourage you to look at the comments that you receive after your proposal is reviewed and be prepared to resubmit. But, the next slide is the big, most important piece of advice, and is to talk to a program officer at least a month before the application deadline. So now, if you're looking at that September 5th receipt date, now's the time to reach out to us. It's really important to talk to a program officer. We have a list of those program managers at each of the different institutes and centers on our website. If you're not sure who to contact, you can always reach out to our office, seedinfo@nih.gov. So seedinfo@nih.gov. We're happy to take a look at what you're planning to propose just briefly, and we'll be able to connect you. So with that, I believe I encourage you to connect with us, but I'm going to hand it over to Monique, who's going to talk a little bit more, as I said, about some general information, tools and tips, and maybe provide an institute perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, everyone. So, yes, so Stephanie mentioned, product focused and commercialization driven. So on the next slide, I just kind of demonstrate how we think of it kind of at a big picture. So if you're coming from the R01, R21 world, you're in a great spot. We fund a lot of university spinouts, and you have already developed really strong grant writing expertise, and you're not dissuaded from NIH from this super long grant application. So this is all a good thing. I find that university spinouts have a lot of resilience with NIH and reapplying and writing applications. So that's a good thing. I think now the challenge is to think about writing throughout the application a focus on the product. So for example, on your specific aims page, I see people who are early to the program. I'll see statements about, we are testing the hypothesis, and they'll spend, a couple of lines talking about the hypothesis-driven science that they're testing. Instead, they could use that space to, really add a quantitative milestone, for example, for one of their specific aims right on that specific aims page, which, you'll go into a lot more detail later on in the application and the research strategy. But I think, that's one tip I would have, and one way to think about your application on every page as you go through is you'll have the science, of course, you'll have your expert technical team. Innovation is key, but, thinking about that product throughout the application in that way. So getting started on the next slide. If you're brand new, I think here's a couple places I'd recommend starting. The top link, the SF424, is kind of like the big instruction packet for NIH, SBIR, STTR. It does change every year or year and a half, so just make sure you have the right form. Right now we're on Forms I. And I do like to say, and just warn you, it is over 100 pages long. So if you have trouble sleeping at night, there's an added benefit here by checking it out. So I do, though, if you talk to a program director and you have a bunch of questions about things like page limits and things like that, I do suggest if you take a look at the SF424, kind of answer those questions ahead of time. And then when you come and talk to a program officer, we can kind of focus on the specific details of your science and your project and your aims instead of kind of some of these other details. If you are looking at September 5th and you haven't completed the registrations for your company, that's something I would also start right away. And I have the link there to see. It has a great website where they lay out the 4 required registrations with links to them. So on the next slide, I have just 3 institutes that I know of off the top of my head that do have sample applications. Like Stephanie mentioned, these are actually real applications. We call them samples, but they're real applications that were funded. A little bit of redaction here and there, but I think this will give you a good sense if you've never seen one of these applications kind of at a high level, what are the similarities and differences between the R01 world. So, NCI has some, the Allergy Infectious Disease has some, and the Institute on Aging does as well. So the next slide, I think a helpful tool and just answers a question that I get asked a lot as a program officer is, what does NIH or NCI fund in their particular space of interest? And if you Google NIH Reporter, you'll come up with a search page. And if you click on advanced search, you can actually click and filter on just SBIR, STTR projects, put in a few keywords, and then you can even filter by institute if you want. If you know, for example, that your technology definitely fits within the Cancer Institute or another institute. And I think this is really helpful. This will give you access to titles, company names, abstracts for anything that NIH has funded related to your keywords. So, this is government transparency at its best, in my opinion, and can give you some quick information and more than just talking to one program officer, would be able to give you. So the next page, Stephanie highlighted the importance of talking to a program officer. And, I just say, we're here even before you apply. It's part of my job and my colleagues' job to, hopefully help you with the process. The best way to do it, I think, is to draft a specific aims and then send it to a contact at that institute. I think that's another important point. I think NIH is a bit challenging sometimes for entrepreneurs versus NSF because each institute does have some details that are quite different, like the max budget, for example, for a phase 1 or a phase 2. And so you want to make sure that you're maximizing that budget. I do see from kind of new people to the program, I do see often a phase 1 sent to the Cancer Institute, and they've asked a max budget of $300K, which is the max budget for some institutes, but ours is $400K. And so now, you're kind of putting yourself, I think, at a disadvantage. Reviewers are reviewing your project that's a bit smaller next to these others that sound more exciting because more work is being done with the $400K. So I think, that's a good place to start. And if you don't know which institute, I think it's worth a little bit of time to talk to maybe a program officer at a couple different institutes and see where you might fit best. We do fund a lot of platform technologies at the Cancer Institute, but I know there's other institutes that do as well. So I think that can be helpful. And then, like I said, that will help you tailor your application a little bit. So the next slide, Stephanie mentioned the review process, and yes, it looks very similar with investigator, significance, innovation approach, et cetera. But then the focus, I think, of the reviewers, what the reviewers are looking for is a little different. So for example, significance, you really want to make sure reviewers understand the unmet medical need and that there is a commercial potential. I want to highlight that it doesn't necessarily have to be the largest commercial potential. We are, the Cancer Institute and NIH, we do fund things in rare diseases. So that's not necessarily the driving factor, but there does need to be an unmet need with a potential product. I think innovation is really key to be successful with NIH, highlighting your innovation, making it very clear at a high level, even on the specific aims page, and keeping in mind, I think, the study sections. Study sections are a bit more broad, I think, for SBIR than for the R01 world. So, for example, I know a lot of our therapeutics applications related to cancer, they get to this one study section, cancer drug development and therapies. So it's not a focus on any one type of cancer, and in reviewers, you'll have reviewers with all different backgrounds related to cancer therapeutics. And so, you really don't want to kind of rely on maybe their knowledge of standard of care for that indication you're working on. You just at a high level want to say, hey, maybe this is a brand new cancer target. There's nothing being developed right now in the clinic for this target, and just have those high level ideas and sentences throughout the application, just to really make sure reviewers appreciate the innovation and kind of understanding no matter what their background is. So resubmission. We do, speaking for the Cancer Institute, we do sometimes fund applications very first try, come under Payline, and that's great. Most people experience the resubmission and then sometimes even having to apply again with a new application and another resubmission. So we'll just say, we do see scores improve, not all the time, but more often than not for resubmission. So when you get your summary statement, that's when we have access to the summary statement information as well. So just, contact your program director. That's listed in the upper left-hand corner of the summary statement. We're happy to talk with you and about the questions. I did want to highlight the second point there about significance, again, just because it is important that reviewers really understand this. One area, if you're finding that reviewers just aren't really appreciating the need or the significance, one area you can think about with this mechanism is your letters of support, and kind of going beyond just your collaborators. Of course, you'll have letters of support, et cetera, but thinking about key opinion leaders in the field that maybe you've talked with them, pitched your idea maybe, and they think your technology has a little promise, they would write a letter saying, hey, I work at this NCI designated cancer center. I see a lot of patients, and this would really help them with X, Y, and Z versus what I have currently available. Those types of letters sometimes can help with that type of comment. All right, so now I'm just, for the last part, going to just spend a couple slides on commercialization resources. These are resources that are available through NCI SBIR, so I won't spend a ton of time on them. The resources I'm showing in green here are open to companies that have NCI SBIR or STTR awards with us. And we have some regulatory support, we have some commercialization support, and then our investor initiative program, where we try to help companies begin to put together their pitch deck. We pay for them to go and pitch at an event and hopefully start meeting investors early on. So on the next slide, I'll move to one resource. It's open to everybody. It's available on our website. It is oncology focused in a way, but I think some of these topics can apply to anybody who's looking to write an SBIR STTR application to NIH. So, for example, we have one on specific aims page. We have one on the commercialization plan, and that's part of the phase 2 application. And what's different about these videos is, instead of hearing from myself or other program officers, they're actually videos of entrepreneurs who have been successful in that area and who have been kind enough to share their time with us and kind of try to give their perspective on how they did it, and share tips with other startups. The next slide, I just want to highlight, we also have a podcast. If you're interested, prefer podcasts, it's I think we're up to 20 something now, all in different areas. Sometimes we interview other startups and entrepreneurs as well to get their perspective. And lastly, reach out, stay in touch if you want. If you're having trouble finding a program officer at a particular institute at NIH, happy to try to help. If you are interested in a cancer-related technology, feel free to check out our website, send us an email, specific aims page, and happy to meet. So thanks again for your interest in the program.
Thanks so much, Monique. We have a lot of questions. So we have 15 minutes left for the regularly scheduled program. We'll probably go for the extra 15 minutes as well. So for those of you who can stay on, that's great. But we will be getting to every single question that we can within the next half an hour. I'm going to start off with a very broad question, which I think that was somewhat addressed at the beginning, but I think it deserves more attention. And Barbara, I'm going to ask it to you. Could you please briefly explain the difference between SBIR and STTR and give a couple of examples?
I'm probably not as good of a person to do that as my colleagues here, because I think they have more vivid examples. So.
All right. Stephanie, do you mind if I?
Sure, happy to do that. So, and I briefly touched on this, and I think when you think about SBIR versus STTR, the important thing to remember is they are two distinctive programs. And each agency, not all agencies are required to have both, so it depends on the size of the program. At HHS, we do have both programs. Each agency may use them a little bit differently. So here at HHS, when we're thinking about SBIR and STTR, the scope of the kinds of work that can be covered within both SBIR and STTR are very, very similar. Really, it's that partnering component. STTRs require that partner versus SBIRs do allow for partnering, but there's not a requirement. And when we say require a partner, you have to identify one nonprofit U.S. research institution partner, and that partner has to do a specific percentage of the work. And so there is a requirement that that partner do some component of the work. Now, when we're talking about examples, I think that's less relevant, except to say it's more important when you're thinking about, hey, do I want to do an SBIR versus an STTR? That's a great question to talk through a program officer. I will point out, oftentimes when you look, the STTR set aside is much smaller than the SBIR set aside. That can turn people off of STTR. Please don't let it turn you off of the STTR program. It all depends on the number of applicants that we receive. And if you look across NIH, and this can be different based on individual institutes or centers, based on the kinds of applications they receive in any one year. But if you look across the NIH and across years, in general, the success rate for the SBIR versus the STTR, shockingly similar, very, very similar. Why is that? STTR program, much smaller budget, far fewer applications. So I would tell you, do what makes most sense for your company and the project. If it makes sense for you to have a really solid partner and that university partner is really critical, the STTR might make sense for you. If not, I would tell you to don't try to force yourself into one versus the other to try to follow the money. Now, that said, individual institutes and centers may one year or another be a little bit more tighter on one versus the other. But it's important to think more generally what makes the most sense for your company and this project and what makes the strongest application.
If I could, I was going to add just a couple of things, and such a better answer than I would have given. We often have the program officer coach someone as to what makes more sense, but one of the major things we see is if you need a university partner or you need this partner, oftentimes it's because they have some big expensive piece of equipment that you need. And so it makes sense to partner with a university or other partner to be able to move your project forward. But, to echo what my colleagues have said here is program officers are great coaches. So if you're invited and you submit a proposal, there is not much difference at all in the NSF SBIR STTR program. That's why I thought it would be better to have Stephanie speak to it. It's really whether you need this partnership. And we have trouble meeting our STTR goal. So, hot tip.
Yeah. Monique, was there something you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, all very great advice. I think, the subaward size, that is what I see companies use to determine which way to go. And then also where the PI is located majority time. So many universities, require you majority time at the university. So then that kind of makes the easy, quick decision for STTR.
I think there are going to be a few quick questions and answers. Barbara, I'll ask this first one to you. Do reviewers change from round to round? And because that could complicate it by changing reviewers, or do reviewers try to keep the same reviewers from round to round?
We absolutely do not keep the change reviewers round to round. They are all new reviewers all the time. And that's actually very important to make sure there's no bias one way or another. That is for your benefit.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thanks. Next question, Monique, I'll ask this to you, but if someone else wants to answer as well, because I'm not sure if this changes depending on the agency. Do I need to have a physical lab in the company or just an EIN/address in collaboration with an academic, my own academic department? Is that fine?
Yeah, great question. At time of application, you don't need to have your own separate space and physical location, but at time of award at NIH, you do. So definitely include that information in your plan in the application.
Okay.
And at NSF, no, you don't. You just need to be able to get the work done and demonstrate that you have those resources, facilities identified in your proposal so that we know that you can get the work done.
That's great. So good to know there is a difference between the agencies. All right. Next up, for SBIR or STTR, does a C Corp already need to be established? Stephanie, I'll start with you on that one.
You do need to have a company in order to submit. So you will need, and there's a number of registrations. So one of the things when you're looking online and you're looking at that application, you need to check and make sure, am I registered everywhere I need to be? And the big one of them is with the Small Business Administration. The company does need to be registered there with NIH, and it also, you need to register with SAM. You need to register with several different components. And so I would encourage you to take a look at those. What's important for NIH specifically, in order to submit an application With the NIH, you need to make sure that you have an ERA Commons account, and you actually need two. Even if you're a one-person company and you're the only person in that company, you need two, one for the company and one for yourself as the principal investigator. So just bear in mind, check to see that you have all of your registrations. They can take a little while to process. So if you're looking for us at that September 2nd, the September 5th receipt date, you need to start doing those registrations right now if you haven't already done them. I'm going to make a quick comment about what's needed, like what do you have to have in hand when you go to that application and start submitting that application. You don't need to have everything in hand. You don't need to have that lease signed. You don't need to have all of that stuff in hand. I think it's really, to Barbara's point, you need to show that you can do the work, and that if you get the application, all of that stuff is going to fall into place. You'll have that lease ready to go. You'll have, you'll be able to do the work that's necessary within the application. And eligibility is determined at the time of award. I know we got a couple of questions about eligibility. I think instead of diving into all the details about eligibility here, I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the eligibility guidelines that the Small Business Administration puts out. They have a whole eligibility handbook, basically, where it walks through different eligibility questions and guidelines. It just, that is really great. You can find it through our website. You can find it through NSF's website. We all point there eventually, really. I mean, to be perfectly honest, because the Small Business Administration sets the eligibility for the program. Eligibility is determined at the time of award. So it's really important to know, hey, I'm proposing something in an application, but when I'm awarded, I'm going to be able to execute on that. I'm going to have the space I need to execute on that, and I'm going to be eligible for the program.
I'd like to make one comment on that, where we are the same as it points to the application. When you send us a project pitch, you do not have to have formed your company or have done any of that. So I'd say once you're invited to do your project pitch, you can kick off all those work streams, or invited to do your full proposal. But at the time you submit this fit document, you don't have to have any of that in place. So it's a nice way to, not have to get started on work that you're not quite ready for.
An NSF specific question for you, Barbara. Does
Mhm.
NSF still allow or require letters of support? I saw that, and this person thought they saw somewhere that the rules had changed a few years ago.
They did change a couple of years ago, and maybe one of my big pieces of advice, I loved what Monique did, read the solicitation. That is probably why so many people get into trouble. In a phase 1 award, we do not allow letters of support. In a phase 2 award, we require letters of support. So phase 1, it will be returned without review if you include letters of support. So we will, let you back in, but make sure you don't have extraneous documents that aren't called for in the solicitation, and you do have the stuff that we ask for.
Okay, thanks. Monique, is the NCI Investor Initiative available only to awardees or to the applicants as well?
Good question. It's available to awardees, and it's usually our kind of later stage companies. Once they've gone through their phase 1 with us, they're usually on to their phase 2, which is our larger award, or our phase 2B bridge, which is our largest award of $4.5 million. So yes, that's usually when our companies at least tend to be ready to start meeting investors and go pitching at events.
But I would jump in and say, I think one of the questions that we often get is what resources are open to which companies. And at NIH, we do have a number of resources that are open across NIH. So if you're not an NCI company, that's okay. We do have a number of programs that are available that can help bridge that gap and bring you to commercialization. In addition, there are some programs that are open to individuals who are academics but are looking to that product development space across the National Institutes of Health. For example, there is, if you're in the medical device space, there is something called the C3I program, where several institutes and centers are part of that program, and it is really to help with commercialization and bring things forward and help them kind of prepare for that. So it's not just, some of them are just SBIR, STTR applicants, but some of them can be academics as well. So I would say if you are funded by an NIH institute or center, reaching out and talking to your program officer can be really helpful to say, hey, what resources are available to me? And I would say, I think Monique and I would both agree, one of the things that always surprise me are the individuals, either research grants or small business grantees, who don't realize the different resources, and even better, they get an email, hey, you can get access to this free resource, and they ignore it, which just blows my mind. So definitely be looking for emails and for information about some of the different resources, because some of our resources, some of the things we offer, it's not money, it's resources. It's access to expertise and guidance, starting with the program officers, right? I think what Barbara said, great mentors right there for free.
Well, I now have there are a number of questions that we got that are about the citizenship of the applicants, employees, et cetera. So because obviously all of our attendees are coming from all over. So number one was, can the funding be used to hire non-US citizens or support remote work from foreign employees? Barbara, you want to answer that one?
All the money needs to be spent in the United States. All the research needs to be spent in the United States. Any dollar needs to be spent in the United States.
Okay. And then the follow-up question to that answered two of our questions, is about the ownership of the entity. Could you talk about how ownership of the entity needs to work by citizens or non-citizens?
I'll point to the same resource that Stephanie pointed to, that eligibility criteria. But the easy thing to remember is you must control your company. You must have control of your company. So 51% control of your company. So that kind of helps you figure that out.
Okay, 51% control of the company by US citizens. Okay, terrific. Thank you. We have another question about use of the funds. Actually, we have a few questions about use of the funds. This one person asked, I heard the SBIR and STTRs can't be used toward license fees, but just wanted to, but could potentially be used towards patent costs. Is that correct? What can the fees be used towards with regards to that intellectual property? Stephanie, do you want to go for that one?
Yeah, I would tell you, and this is a great example where reading the instructions becomes really important. I think Monique talked about how they are a bit of a page turner, but what's great about the instructions is they do go into some of those details. What's allowable, what's not allowable with regards to the costs. And, when you start talking about the small business funding, there's the main funding, which is really for that research and development, and we don't generally allow for commercialization activities as part of that research and development, with a little asterisk. We have something called technical and business assistance. And so you can request in your application, specifically for phase 2s, we really emphasize it for phase 2s because it's a little bit more money there. You can request up to $50,000 across your phase 2 for technical and business assistance to contract out and get some support for that technical and business assistance, with a focus, again, to help you with commercialization. The other thing I would note is that you do have something called a fee. So that's your profit, the SBIR fee. Here at NIH, that's a 7% fee. It is larger, I believe, at NSF. I think it's up to 10% over there. But that is your profit. And so you have the flexibility to utilize that fee to support things like intellectual property, paying lawyers, paying different things that are not normally part of the SBIR or STTR cost. So I would encourage you, instead of diving into every specific here, really look at the instructions. And then if you look at our frequently asked questions online. We do actually have frequently asked questions online that kind of covers some of these things around the budget. I'd encourage you to take a look there. And then if you do have additional questions, this is where reaching out to a program officer can be helpful as you're trying to put together that budget to make sure that everything you're doing is allowable cost.
Absolutely. And Monique has been putting some very, very helpful links into the chat for those who are there. We'll also send these out to everyone afterwards when we follow up after the webinars. Well, not only because I know we're just over our hour, we still have another 15 minutes, so we'll continue going through questions, but we will be sending out the decks to everyone afterwards, as well as these links that are being provided as well. Okay, that was super helpful to hear about, how the funds can be used, as well as these additional programs. Another person asked about the programs and the types of work that is being funded. That this person had been under the impression that SBIR or STTR was basically for any type of proposed work, but that recently they had a faculty member to say to them that they thought you had to respond to specific calls or themes or RFPs for these particular programs.
No,
Barbara,
I can't stand it. No, absolutely not. And in fact, we have we call them the omnibus solicitation, the parent solicitations, open topic solicitations. Hopefully that gets to the point. Anything within our mission space can come in through those open topic solicitations, those open parent solicitations. The vast majority, 75% of the awards that we make come in through those open topic solicitations. They're not connected to a specific notice or funding opportunity. So I would say if you don't see a specific RFP or a specific request, a specific notice of funding opportunity that speaks to you, that's okay. Reach out, talk to us. There is a way for you to come in. Some of the best stuff that we've funded, some of our best success stories have come from investigators.
Barbara, was there anything you wanted to add to that? You looked like you wanted to add something to it.
Nope.
Okay, great.
Perfect answer from Stephanie. Send in everything that is on mission.
Great. So someone in here has a question about a DoD SBIR or STTR program. Can we answer any of that, or do we need to shift that off to them going to the DoD?
I think you need to shift that off to the DoD.
And I would say some of the other agencies have defined topics. They have a defined, because the DoD services the armed forces will have a specific problem they're trying to solve. And so they will put out a solicitation for that topic. And if you have a technology that could cover multiple agencies, I would encourage you to check it out. All the different agency funding opportunities. And I should also say, because this happens a lot with our life sciences group and the NIH, we fund something, it gets to a certain point, then they're a good candidate for an NIH application or vice versa. And so different agencies, we do a lot with NASA and the International Space Station, where they have specific things, but they see good companies. So they'll say, hey, these guys have an interesting technology. We think you guys should take a look at them, and they'll encourage them to apply to our program. And we do quite a lot of exchange with that. So,
and I would also add that for different agencies, now this is really important because we do see a lot of mixing up what's the definition of an agency. So just to be very clear, Health and Human Services is an agency. We are one agency. So we have NIH, FDA, CDC, all part of HHS. And then within NIH, we have those 24 different institutes and centers that have a small business program. So Monique works within the National Cancer Institute, part of NIH. So we're all you want to think about us as an agency, and then NSF is an agency. You can submit to 2 different agencies at the same time. You just have to indicate it on your application. There's a little checkbox, so you can submit to NIH and say, hey, I'm also submitting this to NSF. Now it will be a different application. We have different applications. We have different ways of accepting applications, but you could submit the same idea to both, say, NSF and NIH. And that's actually, that's one of the most common places we see that. Quick side note. But you can't, obviously, we won't pay for something twice. The federal government does not like to overpay. So we won't pay for something twice. You can only accept one of those, but you can come to both of us if it's applicable. What you can't do within NIH is submit the same application and try to say, okay, I'm going to submit this same application and I'm going to submit one to NCI and submit one to, say, the neurological disorders and stroke. That's not how it works here. You're submitting to the NIH, and then we are assigning it to an appropriate institute or center. So you cannot submit the same application to different institutes or centers within the NIH. We are all one NIH. So just something to consider and think about. It's important to know where you are likely to be assigned within NIH. That's why talking to a program officer is so important. It's really helpful to know where you're likely to be assigned and what kind of opportunities are available for the research that you are proposing. But just something to consider and keep in mind. We get a lot of questions about that. There's a lot of confusion about what's an agency and what constitutes an agency.
That's not as complicated at NSF, but we do get people to ask, can I do a phase 1 application and a fast track application? And the answer is no. What I would tell you is if you really do have a good idea of the commercial path you're going to take and you have people identified to help you on that commercial path, then you're probably okay for a fast track. But if you're not ready for that, go for a phase 1. You can still go for the phase 2 and 2B after that. And there's a high success rate. So don't jump into something that you're not prepared for and then be declined. We will, if we think the phase 1 activities are highly meritorious, we rate the phase 1 and the phase 2 stages separately. And so the panel might rate the phase 1 highly enough that we would demote it to a phase 1 grant. I mean, we're founder first, so we try to do the right thing by the founder. So we will do that, but at NSF, it's really quite simple. You're either you're in SBIR. That's the only program at NSF.
Right, and it is more complicated at NIH. We do have different ways that we manage the fast track, that phase 1, phase 2 proposal. There's different ways that we do have a direct to phase 2. We have all of these options. Talking to a program officer can really help you try to figure out, wait a minute, what's the best option for me? Or is it a specific program, or are there other resources that are also available to me? So that's why reaching out is so important. Hopefully that's, if you take nothing from our conversation today, reach out and talk to them.
And our program officers have a much larger amount of stuff that they look at. And so I would just say, if you can't find it with some of our resources and on the information pages, go ahead and drop an email and we will route it to the right person. So SBIR@nsf.gov.
Great. I'm going to do a few more rapid fire questions and then we will be ending. We're not going to get to all the questions just because we have far too many that are left. However, Katie, if you have an ability to put up that last slide that has people's contact information, again, we'll be sending this around so you will have access to this, but you've heard it from all of them here today. Just reach out. They will answer your questions. So go ahead, reach out directly and they will answer them. Next question, does the company need to demonstrate that it has secured necessary intellectual property, commercialize the anticipated product through an option or a license? Barbara?
Generally, yes, they have to be on that path and convince us that they're going to be successful, because otherwise they won't have a sustainable competitive advantage. So we need them to demonstrate they have sustainable competitive advantage. It doesn't have to be locked in stone. We'll accept patent applications, but if it's licensed technology, we want at least a letter that they're working through it with the institution.
Great, thanks. Monique, is the SBIR STTR deadline eligible for the 2-week delay for NIH ad hoc reviewers?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, Stephanie. think so. I don't know.
So our deadline is one of the last deadlines for a council. I would say to you, we do have the ability, people can submit late. You can request a late submission. You can put that as a rationale for late submission, but do keep in mind we don't have to accept it. So it's important, just because you request a delay doesn't mean that it is accepted. I really encourage you, try to hit the receipt date. And even better, try to hit earlier than the receipt date.
Okay, great.
And we don't give any extensions. We have 3 deadlines per year. We just had the July 2nd deadline. The next one is November 5th.
And I would say a question I actually get asked more often is they hit the receipt date, but then they have new data that they want to submit. And there is some policy out there that you can do that as long as it's X number of days before your review. And I would encourage people not to do that, though, because I sit in a lot of study sections, and honestly, the reviewers, whether they technically can or can't, the reviewers most often miss that new data. So yeah, in practicality, I would just try to get everything in by the receipt date with your best data.
We allow one proposal file update within a week of your submission having been sent in. So we allow 1 week to provide any new updates to your proposal file.
Oh, great. Who is responsible for award reporting obligations, specifically regarding bi-dole requirements? The grant recipient or the university/nonprofit partner who would be the entity protecting NAIP?
The grant recipient is always, so for a specific award, the grant recipient, the money, and this is actually, it's a general question of for an STTR, whose award is it? The answer is it's the small business. The award always goes to the small business, and the partnering university is actually a subaward. And so the responsibility for whatever happens in that grant, the reporting, all the things that happen, and all the responsibilities is on the small business. And remember, the award goes to the small business, not to the investigator. So it's the small business's award. So that small business is responsible for all the reporting requirements and all the things that need to be done in order once you have a grant.
Wonderful. That's good to know. Because I know that's something that the institutions work on a lot, is all of that reporting. So next up, do we need to have a proof of concept established for a phase 1? And I imagine this is going to be very specific on the industry area, et cetera. But that was the general question. And Barbara, maybe I'll throw that to you first. Proof of concept.
Definitely. You have to be in that final phase of research and starting to do applied R&D to develop it into a product and a commercial view. So there should be some preliminary data, simulations. We do a lot of, outer space stuff. So nobody has actually flown out there. They do it through simulation. You have to show us that there's some proof of concept for us in the phase.
What type of clinical trials are allowed? Phase 1 or others? Monique, can I ask that of you first?
Sure. Yep. And I would say it does depend on the institute at NIH. So some institutes will not cover clinical trial work. At the Cancer Institute, we definitely do. And first in human are most common, but we also fund phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials.
Great. Do program managers travel to give presentations to regional ecosystems to help promote the programs and help engage with PIs? Barbara and Stephanie, do you want to talk to that?
I'll just say, yes, we do. I do. Travel funds are very, very limited right now. And so we look for those big strategic conferences or particular, postdoc groups where we can really make a difference. But we definitely are available to do those kinds of things at NSF.
Terrific.
And never underestimate the power of virtual. We can, it's easy for us to say yes to a virtual meeting, as you can see. It's easy for us to say yes to a virtual meeting. That's something we can definitely do. And we do a number of those smaller virtual meetings as well. Also, go to the Small Business Administration webpage. There is often a road tour where not just the people you see here, but all sorts of other agencies. They load us up on a bus, quite literally, and we drive around the country. And it's a great way to not just see, again, NIH and NSF, but some of the other agencies that may support the kinds of research that you're doing. Again, there are multiple agencies that have small business programs. Each of them cover different aspects of things, and it's always a great idea to take a look and see, hey, maybe it's not just NIH and NSF, maybe it's DoD, maybe it's NASA, maybe it's one of these other agencies.
And office hours, we do office hours, very powerful. You get to talk to the program director. So keep on our websites, all of that, those webinars and upcoming and office hours are listed generally.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much. Before I finish my thanks to you, I do want to mention to the audience, I know a lot of people have stayed far over the time that we initially had for this webinar. We do have a questionnaire that will pop up as you leave the webinar. It's just 5 questions. We do appreciate your responses. This is how we end up having more webinars like this that are helpful to our audiences. So please do answer that. And we really appreciate all of you being here today, our audience. But I especially want to thank all of you, Monique, Barbara, Stephanie, for being here today and providing this incredibly valuable information. I know we did not get to all the questions, but that just shows how much interest there is in this particular topic. We are so thankful for the work that you are doing in this area, that these grants really are supporting our nation and these startup efforts that are trying to come out of our, particularly, we work with academic institutions, so I always focus on the academic institutions, but in general, helping these small businesses get off the ground. So thank you all for what you do. Thank you for being here today and presenting on this. I know that there will be follow-up questions to all of you, but we really appreciate the time that you were able to devote to this. So with that,
thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will let everyone go. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, and everyone enjoy the rest of their day.